Reload. Yeah, let's go for reload. Show anyway? Perfect. Okay. Maybe you're like in alert because you really don't know what to do with your career. That's definitely me. Or you're feeling like hiding in the cave. So show me with your fingers what number you think you are. 3, 2, 2, 2, 2. My God. Really? Yeah. I'm like 3, I guess. So that's really great. It's really great to start the session like this because I think that we are all here in this room because we all want to use our skills and creativity for good at work. And we know that there is a gap between value and action. And meanwhile, we know that every job in this industry needs to be a climate job. But transitioning is not easy, right? So what should you expect today is a journey through careers for climate and the future of work. What are the challenges? What are we facing? What are the solutions? Creativity as a force for solution. Woo, that's exciting. An industry in transition. What has happened? What is happening today? And where are we leading? An anti-greenwashing game, and this is really exciting for me because you need to keep your eagle eye on. And we will wrap up with a call to action. So right up front, and to formalize the opening of this session today, I want to invite Lucy, founder and CEO of Creators for Climate, Amir, founder of the Marketplace of the Future, which is hosting us today, and Christy, co-founder for Green Jobs Board, to say some welcome words. So big applause for them.
Thanks so much, Ursula.
Right. Oh.
Hey, Amir.
Hello,
Hi.
ladies.
Yay.
Welcome back for the second year that we do this, third that we do this. Welcome back.
Love it.
Powerhouse.
So
How's
happy to
Climate
be
Week
here.
been? How's Climate Week been?
I lost my voice.
I lost my voice.
It's been amazing, but I think what's so nourishing about what you're creating here at Marketplace is that it's like for the people. I knew that today would really feel like the community, and for me that's the most important thing, so I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I've just been so proud of seeing how Marketplace of the Future has grown over time, and I just think it's such an incredible space that is a meeting of the minds, but ultimately a meeting of family and community to really ideate and innovate on the future. So happy to be here.
We're very proud of you, Amir.
Thank you. This is not about me. Thank you. Seth almost made me cry a second ago. I don't know if y'all were in this room, but that was like, yeah. Let's talk about y'all. Lucy, bring us into your world a little bit. Help set the stage for what's about to be the next couple of hours. What can we expect? What's going through your head?
So I wanted to pay tribute to the fact that we know that Climate Week needs to be more accessible, and I think that Marketplace for the Future has always been a really accessible starting point for smaller businesses, small nonprofits. That's how we were able to platform ourselves 3 years ago. And we came back last year, and so I'm really excited. 3 years ago we met Christy and Green Jobs Board, and I just think that we need more spaces like this that are accessible, that are really profiling people that are doing the community work. So I want to take people on a journey to support them, and that Christy's really going to lead that around climate careers, and then maybe create some provocative questions around the kind of messages that you might apply your skill sets to, with a little bit of our work at Creators for Climate. But Christy, what's your perspective on today?
Yeah, so I'm so excited. I'll be leading a conversation on how to transition into a climate career and thinking about what is the future of work overall. And I think this space is so important because I think it's a bit different than some other conversations we've been seeing about, the future of the green economy. I think it's talking about not just what the jobs are, but how to creatively strategize around getting said jobs. Because what we're learning about the green job space is that there's not clear roadmaps. There's not clear, calls to action or pathways. So we have to figure out how to build that out. Because things are going to get thrown your way that you don't expect. And so, yeah, so I would just say that, us at Green Jobs Board, we love Marketplace of the Future because, it really aligns with our vision to be an educational and community-driven platform to get every person into a climate job. And just really excited to be able to be a part of facilitating those conversations that will lead people to more curiosity and more, awareness of where they need to go next.
That's beautiful. Y'all, thank you for your words and for your work, both. Put your hands up if you are already following Green Jobs Board or Christy. Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. Yes. And Creators for Climate. Amazing. Right. So this really is evidence of the family vibes, that y'all speak of. And so thank you all again for being here. Yeah, Lucy, do you want to just take it away?
No, let's go.
I was here to just set the stage, so I'm going to let the power women drive at this point.
Chrissy,
so
you
please.
stay here. I'll get out. Let's do it.
Thank you all. Another round of applause, please.
Great. So before we dive into the first part of the summit, I'm going to hand over these papers, and you need to grab one badge because we have a really cool dynamic at the end, so you need to keep it with you until the end. Okay, so this first part of the summit is going to be really about a question that might be in our minds, which is, what are the challenges that we face when we are transitioning? Whoa, party, yeah, So what are the barriers and what are the solutions that we find? Okay, perfect. We can go to the next slide, that's fine. So I want to invite Daniel Hill to the stage, creator of Open Door Climate and director at Environmental Defense Fund. And he's gonna walk us through the challenges and also to the solutions. So big applause for him.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Hill. You can go to the next slide. So just a quick show of hands. How many people currently work on climate issues as part of their job? Oh, damn. That's a lot. That's really cool. Okay. And how many people, second show of hands, how many people are trying to or thinking about working in climate space? Okay. Somehow I feel like people raise their hand twice. So those that raise their hands that are already working in the space, you know that we need all the people that raise their hands that wanted to in the space. And those that are trying to are probably really sick of hearing people like me say that we need as many people on hands and deck and all these other cliches about we need everyone, because here you are raising your hand and not being called on. And that sucks. And I think all of us that have work in the space now know what that felt like, know that frustration, know how frustrating it is to feel stuck like that. But the reality is we do need everyone, and also we can all empathize with you, so we're here. So, oh, damn, right to the embarrassing photo. So I also know firsthand, I was in that same place. I went to school to study renewable energy. I also studied questionable fashion decisions. And specifically, I was interested in alternative fuels work. This is a photo from my thesis. I'm micropipetting, so you know I'm serious. But when I graduated, I did not know one person that worked in renewables or alternative fuels. I had no idea what job skills were required to actually work in the alternative space. I obviously had no experience because I graduated during a massive recession and I was grabbing any internship I could get. And then just to add on to that, I couldn't actually name a company that was doing this work, much less a job title. So that's a lot. And the truth is, all those barriers are still, 15 years later now, evident for climate job seekers. And I know that because I've heard from around 5,000 of them. Connections is always an issue. It's a new space, whether transitioning or just starting out. Not having a network is a very real problem. You can go back. Not being sure about what skills actually map that you already have to these new jobs that you're trying to get. Not having direct experience in the field, obviously, when you're reading these absurd job descriptions about needing 5, 10, 15 years of experience in something that's been around for 5 years maybe. And then actually not really being sure what organizations are out there, what the job title you should be looking for that matches what you want to do. So, I'll just share how I got started and how I kind of got through that. Next slide. For me, it was all about people taking time to talk to me about their work. That included like a friend's brother that told me about just the field of energy audits. A super chatty neighbor that told me about this like clean tech startup that moved into their building that they work at. I learned about the first incubator I got into for my own startup from a shoe vendor at a pop-up market. Like really informal conversations. It was not a 5-year plan. It was not about having this super clear pathway. But because of that, it did take kind of the kindness of people's heart to make that space and have those conversations with me, which is why I've always tried to pay that forward throughout my career. Go to the next slide. So I get a lot of these requests, and I've gotten them throughout my career. They've definitely been increasing, which is awesome to see. And whenever I can, I try to take these calls, just people asking, what do you do for work? What are you up to? And then 2 years ago, I had this idea of, well, what if it wasn't so random? Like, what if these serendipitous, informal conversations that led to some breakthrough weren't so by chance or weren't so passive? So I put up this post on LinkedIn basically saying, hey, I have an open door policy. If anyone wants to talk about this, reach out. I'll share what I know. I'm not a career coach. I can tell you about my own personal experience. And I ended it with this hashtag, OpenDoorClimate. That day, I heard, I think, 400 requests to have conversation. And I took 50 calls over the next 2 weeks. And those calls were all about, tell me about how you got where you are. Tell me about what you do day to day. What skills are most important in your job. Really personal things that I could speak to and that I could actually try to share with others. But obviously, I'm one perspective, I'm one voice. There's no way I can take 400 calls in that amount of time. That's insane. So I started reaching out to friends. I started reaching out to colleagues, my network, and said, are you open to doing the same kind of policy just to be more accessible for people? And a lot of people said, yep, I'm in. Let's do this. And suddenly, it just kind of caught on. And more, this kind of grassroots movement started of climate professionals making themselves accessible to talk to people that are interested in the space. And then today, there's a directory of over 2,500 climate professionals that have stood up and said, I'm here to talk to you, reach out, let's have a conversation, I'll tell you everything that I can. So this is on the Open Door Climate website. You can search, you can browse, you can do whatever. Obviously, I don't think a hashtag is going to solve this. That's crazy. This is just one resource. For me, this is highlighting a much bigger need, though, for us working in the space to be much more accessible to those wanting to work in the space. Because as many asynchronous, automated, scalable resources and solutions that are out there today, the number one thing that people are asking for usually is just a conversation with a person. And that's what this is trying to get to. And however that shows up, awesome. But I think that's a huge barrier that we need to address. So the other good news is, 15 years later, there's a lot of very good resources out there that do help with a lot of those barriers that I experienced 15 years ago and that a lot of you might be experiencing now. There's climate-specific communities that are really focused on focus area or geography or identity or whatever it is that you are interested in. There are communities ready out there like Creatives for Climate. There's amazing upskilling programs now that are helping fill really specific climate technical skills and non-technical skills that can help people instead of going to a traditional school. There's climate fellowships that are available to help people get that real world kind of depth and experience. And there's also really great job search and career resources out there that can help people just find and filter right away to climate organizations. The other thing I have to mention is getting a climate job title is one way to actually take climate action through your work. Some of the most impactful ways to do that is actually to find ways to green your existing job. Project Drawdown has these amazing action guides. or to actually use your collective voice as an employee to advocate to your company to actually take action beyond whatever that is they're doing. So I'll just leave with kind of these 3 takeaways for those that are trying to enter into the space. One is to absolutely find community. If you're on this journey, it can be super isolating, it can be very lonely. Finding people that are going through the same thing, being able to share failures and learnings and connections is always going to be constant and always going to be valuable throughout your career. The second is to focus on relationships. The whole like application spray approach is not good. It's just super frustrating. Really focus your time and attention like it is an investment, and think about that in terms of building relationships, because those can lead to direct jobs maybe, but also just way easier ways to learn things that are not on your radar. And the last I'll say is just to kind of reflect and be curious throughout the whole thing. As I mentioned in the beginning, I was interested in alternative fuels. I've never worked in alternative fuels a day of my life, and that's intentional. It's because of things that I learned along the way, and I said, actually, that seems like an area I could have more impact, or that seems to align more with who I am. And that openness is a really valuable thing to kind of carry with you throughout your career in this. So I'll stop there. I just want to say thank you all for showing up. Thank you for your interest. If you are on this journey, know that people are here to help you, so please reach out, and just thank you all.
Thank you, Daniel. And I just want to keep with this key takeout, which is find your community. That was really important for me. I think like be surrounded by people that you can learn from and that you can contribute to is quite important. So moving now into the next part, we will have an exciting panel, and that's why we kept Christy sitting here. And this panel is going to be about the future of work. So yeah, that's going to be our second part now.
Okay, well, welcome me back here on stage. I'm so excited to be doing today's conversation today with some amazing folks. Oh, you all can join. That'd be amazing. And all of these folks that you see here on the stage all are doing really unique approaches to addressing, the career transition to get into climate. And for people who don't know me, I'm Christy Drummond. I'm the co-CEO of Green Jobs Board. We are a platform focused on empowering job seekers with all the tools and resources necessary to take action on the climate crisis and build a career that matters. And for us, when we're thinking about this topic of career transitions and the future of work, I think the biggest thing for us is how do we create more transparency and accessibility? And in order to do that, it requires conversations. It requires understanding people's journeys on this path, understanding the good, the bad, the ugly, and being really honest about it. And so I'm really excited to have these different panelists break down how they each approach addressing the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to transitioning into a climate career, and giving you all some really practical, tangible steps that you can use to make the transition yourselves. So I'm so excited to have the 3 of you on the stage with me today, and I'd love to start here. Obviously, you just gave an incredible presentation, including your questionable fashion choices, to everyone here, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself, but I would love to have you intro yourself, your work, and also maybe just, what excites you about the future of, the green career transition, landscape. Yes.
I just spoke so much. You want me to
That's all
start?
right.
Okay.
That's all right.
I'm Daniel Hill. So I created Open Door Climate, but I also am Director of Innovation at Environmental Defense Fund. I'll jump to the excitement one. For me, I do get really excited about the concept of just integrated climate action throughout all work. I don't think having thousands and thousands of CSOs in 10 years is going to be the answer. I think it's really going to be about integration. So anything towards that, I always get excited about.
Thank you. Yes, okay, on. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming here. It's so awesome to be presenting to you today about my organization and also my own journey in this space. My name is Gareth Gransell. I'm the co-executive director and co-founder of Regeneration, which is a youth movement that is rethinking the future of business and specifically trying to empower the next generation of leaders to rethink how the economy can serve human and ecological well-being. We have a large web platform, which Daniel highlighted on the slide, which aim to help people get informed, get involved, and get a job in 7 sectors of the clean economy, which include circular economy, clean energy, sustainable food, impact investing. And for each of those sectors, we have a mini documentary that spotlights the stories and organizations that are leading in that space to really sort of help people see examples of what it looks like to have careers in this sector and find stories that inspire them to get involved. But I also wanted to add that we got started as a youth movement of business students that we're trying to transform business education, and in 2021 we released a manifesto for what we call the Necessary Capitalist Reformation, which was all about challenging the culture in business schools about things like shareholder primacy and the role of corporations in society, even like challenging neoliberalism as an ideology, which says that the role of business is only to make profit. And we really wanted to sort of help people envision more boldly the role of markets in society. And one of the ways that we also do that is by highlighting a very problematic sort of trend or phenomenon that we see very often in a lot of schools, which is this thing that sociologists call the corporate career funnel, which is this sort of a whole pressure of forces that kind of compel people to believe that there are certain careers that are considered prestigious, like banking or management consulting or something like that, and that if you don't do that and if you don't conform, that somehow you are off the beaten path, or you're inferior, or you are confused, or all these kinds of things. And so we really also try to create a community for people that think differently and don't fit the mold and actually want to sort of reimagine what their future could look like. And so a big part of that is often creating like a sense of FOMO and excitement about clean careers, and turning away from a lot of the kind of negative and alarmist messaging that sometimes environmental orgs have, and creating a sense of fun and excitement around the alternatives. And also trying to get people to not work for organizations that we call fossil fuel enablers, and I'm happy to talk more about that after.
Hi everyone, my name is Ayana Bodhi. I work at Project Drawdown. We are a climate solutions focused organization, and our mission is very simple. It's to stop climate change as quickly and safely and equitably as possible. I specifically work within our private sector engagement program, and I work with non-sustainability employees to help them turn their jobs into climate jobs, to take climate action in the workplace using the skills and the resources and the expertise that they already have. And Daniel kind of said what I was going to say about why I'm really excited about the future of work and climate, just around just getting more people to realize that their current jobs really are connected to climate action, and just generally empowering workers as people who have more power than you might think that you do to create change within the workplace, within institutional settings. And I'm just really excited about using the skills and resources that folks already have to hold their companies accountable, and also just be empowered as change makers.
Amazing. Can we get a round of applause for all of them? Well, I really want this session because we don't have a lot of time to be very practical. And because I love talking about, like, every job could be a climate job, and I love that. But we got to be honest about, like, how do we get there? What's the roadmap, right? Because that's what today's about. So I want to talk about this concept of, like, transferable skills, and how people could start making a skills inventory of, you know, what are the things that they're good at that maybe could exist and could be transferable into different climate type jobs or industries. So I'd love to go to each of you and ask, like, from what you've seen, what are some of the most valuable transferable skills that someone could possess going in to transition into climate? I could start.
I guess I'll start. Stakeholder engagement is one of the things that I think is just like so universal in this work, because it's never one department, one program's job to do sustainability and climate right. So being able to work with others, both within a company and outside, and customers and suppliers, that skill is incredibly useful. In terms of that kind of like skills inventory, when I talk to folks, a lot of the time I try to make them get as specific as they can. So like, there's a bit of a funnel I always think of, like I'm interested, or like I kind of know what sector, and then like I know exactly what I want to do. Getting that really specific kind of concept makes a lot of those questions a lot easier, because then you can find someone that might have that job and ask them like, what are the skills that you use on a day-to-day basis, and then start to map, what do I have, what do I need to fill, what can I not. So being able to get specific, I think, can really help kind of that inventory.
Yeah, I would say often it's a lot of those softer skills that are sometimes overlooked. But for example, adaptability is a huge one, because in this space, the frameworks and standards and all these things change all the time, and that's a whole other conversation about how frustrating that is. But being able to like sort of learn on your feet quickly and being able to adapt is very important. I would say building really authentic connections with people is very important. I find that networking in this space is very different, because it's often based more on building an authentic connection with someone that's based in mutual interest and not just sort of trying to, get something in exchange for something else. And so that also relates to the point that Daniel said about cultivating really specific interests and sort of demonstrating that you know what you're talking about before. I get a lot of requests that people are like, oh, I want to work in the social impact industry. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. We need to talk more about like, how can you sort of create some domain knowledge based on a passion, and then think about finding the right people in that space. And a lot of the time, you approach it from a systems lens. So there's lots of different people in the public, private, and civil society sectors that are worth talking to that have knowledge about a particular problem area. And I would say that that's sort of system thinking is definitely one of the most important skills as well.
You guys keep stealing my answers. I would just add onto what Garrett said about the soft skills. I think when I talk to a lot of employees who are interested in taking climate action in the workplace, kind of within their roles, and the number one thing that always comes up that I think leads to a lot of success stories is just the ability to be really annoying and persistent, and to always have your voice, and like always be the annoying sustainability person in the room, like, hey, are we thinking about this? Are we thinking about this? And just like bringing it up in multiple venues to multiple people many times, I feel like is kind of key, and it can feel very scary to do that. And so another thing that's really important, like y'all said, is the relationship building, and to find like other really climate passionate employees within your company, within your organization, and team up. I think that it's really important to find collaborators, especially if you are asking for some sort of change within an organizational setting. That can obviously be very scary sometimes. So to have people behind you, people supporting you across different functions, across different teams is really important to kind of like make the business case if you're asking for some sort of change to leadership. And then I would also say is that everyone is the expert of what they do, right? So I would just encourage folks to kind of think about, like, what are you actually doing? I know we always joke like, oh, we don't know what our friends like actually do for work. And so I would encourage you to like actually think about what you do for work. What are you doing on a day-to-day basis where you can find those moments of like integrating climate, integrating sustainability, and just really trying to find those connections to your day-to-day tasks.
Amazing. Ayana, I'm tossing a question back at you again, because I think that's a great segue. What I love that Project Drawdown does is that it's not about shaming a company or an organization to be like, you're not doing enough. You all are about, let me meet where you're at and actually give you all the tools and the information necessary to figure out how to also transition, right? Because it's not just about transitioning your job, it's about transitioning industry in order to create the conditions possible to make those jobs happen and those departments happen. And I know that in some cases, this may be the first time many of these companies or organizations are even thinking about having a sustainability department. So I want to know a bit more on, how can employees, if they don't want to leave their organization and they want to build internally, like what are the steps? Like, what are the kind of conversations they could be having with their coworkers? What could that sound like? Is it sending an email? Is it talking to leadership? What are some of the strategies you've seen be the most successful to build out, an employee resource group or a sustainability department internally?
Yeah, I think, just kind of going back to the sustainability team part too, I really want to mention that, the reason I think it's really important for folks to think about how to take action in the role that they already have is because usually sustainability teams, if there is one, they're 2, 3, 4 people max, which is kind of insane when we think about the task of transforming entire businesses to prioritize climate solutions. So it's actually really necessary to take climate action in your job and think about how every parts of an organization can change. But the actual skills or tangible steps to get there is, it kind of depends on how much decision-making power you have. If you're in a more entry or mid-level role, you might not have a lot of decision-making power. If you're in a more senior level role, you might be able to make changes in your job without asking anybody, you can just do it. But usually I'm working with more mid-level folks who don't have a ton of decision-making power, and I always tell them these 2 to 3 steps. The first one is to really understand what commitments your company has already made. So if your company has made sustainability targets, get super familiar with them so that you can understand the framework that you have to work within to make asks and to ask for change within, and you can point to a plan that has been made at the top to say, hey, you've already made these goals and I have an idea of how to help you reach these goals. That's a really important step. And the second one would be to find your people, again, going back to the relationship building, find other people who are really concerned about climate in your organization. If there's an employee resource group, absolutely join that, because it's a ready-made place to work with your colleagues and organize around and ask. And then the third piece I would say is to find a champion who sits a little bit above you as well. Again, if you're not in a position of decision-making power, to find somebody who does have some decision-making power and who is also kind of concerned about the climate crisis or interested in sustainability, and just get cozy with them, essentially.
I love that. And I think in general, we need to start sharing these conversations across industries. So I think if you're someone who, really cares about this and wants to figure out how did that person do it and that person do it, I think we have to start posting about it more online on success stories and how you were able to push those initiatives. So I get those questions all the time on how did you do that? And we need more models and examples. And I think Project Drawdown has some really great resources on how you can do that. So make sure you check out that on their website. So Daniel, I wanted to ask you a question. You have also an incredible podcast that I've been on, plugging that, and you've interviewed people about thinking about climate transition and how to transition into this space. What are some interesting success stories or things you've heard that really maybe stuck out to you, or you're wow, that person actually transitioned, that's wild, and just something you could share with the audience?
Sure. The name of the podcast is Degrees. I think the ones that stand out the most are when people create opportunity within their existing space. So I echo everything Ayana said. That's exactly it. Finding alignment, finding your people. After that, it could be my company is not willing to do what I want them to do. They're not receptive to this. I've gone through all this stuff. And that point is really interesting, because then it turns over to well, what can I do for myself to get into an opportunity to be able to do those things? So some of the stories that always resonate are the ones where it's I tried this, and then I just started working on something on the side at work, and that became the thing I talked about in interviews. It wasn't my day job, so to speak. It was that thing I worked on 10% of the time that became my biggest talking point in interviews for jobs that I do want, that do align with the thing that I want to do. So I think it gets back to that whole concept of when you've exhausted everything in the space that you're in, and you start to look into what else can I personally do, it really starts to manifest some incredible things.
Amazing. And Gareth, you mentioned, about I would say you kind of dance around the word, but greenwashing that you can see in this industry. And you all are obviously putting out incredible resources to help people suss through the fluff and what's real and what they should address. So what is your recommendations for people who want to transition, but they want to make sure that they need to vet and look out for these things? What are some green flags that you've seen that folks can look out for in a company or organization?
Yeah, for sure. So another resource that we have that's available on our website is a very long document, which needs to be shortened. I think it's 160 pages. It's the Employee Advocacy Toolkit that we actually wrote. And we're in the process of revamping that and creating a shorter version of 4 different guides that are around these 4 demands that we make as a movement, which are reduce emissions in line with global climate goals, raise support for clean energy and phase out fossil fuels, respect indigenous rights and sovereignty, because that's an incredibly important topic, and respect and restore biodiversity and nature. And so for each of those, we're releasing this fall a very concise guide as to how you can evaluate whether you're a student looking for a job or whether you're a employee trying to understand an employer, or someone looking at a potential client or an investor, which is another really important thing when we talk about like scope 3 emissions. What are the databases that are out there that exist that can allow you to do that research? So we've curated this list because the reality is there's a huge amount of information out there, but it's hard to know where it's located. So we've kind of made like an ecosystem map of that. With respect to specifically the climate problem, I would say that a very significant development over the last even just 2 or 3 years, has been that the International Energy Agency has finally developed a 1.5 degree aligned net zero scenario against which corporate managers can sort of assess their capital allocation. And this is really significant, especially because this is the first time that a scenario has been developed that doesn't rely on an excessive amount of reverse combustion or negative emissions technologies. And what that effectively means is that there can't be any more fossil fuel development after 2021. Now, the reality is that there's almost no bank or investor or company in the entire world that is actually aligned with this scenario. And the reason is because it basically means that the fossil fuel industry doesn't have a future. And so there are some industries where it is possible to transition, but that is not one of them. And the difficulty is that that's a conversation a lot of executives don't want to have. And so that's also where employee action sort of has its limitations in terms of the pressure that needs to be applied. And so change is happening, but it's happening slowly. And now Bloomberg has put out a clean energy financing ratio for a lot of institutions that you can go and check out as well. But the reality is that if a company that you work with is still working with fossil fuel clients that are not aligned with this IEA scenario, you know that they're greenwashing, and there are ways to know how to do that. But then I also earlier mentioned that there are companies that are that we call fossil fuel enablers, which are often the firms that are sort of behind the scenes that are providing a lot of strategic advice to the sector. So Creatives for Climate and Clean Creatives and a lot of organizations do amazing work. Clean Creatives released their F-list earlier this week, which are focused on the PR and advertising agencies that facilitate greenwashing on behalf of the industry, but there are also others. For example, there's Law Students for Climate Accountability. They put out a list of law firms that they think facilitate fossil fuel expansion. And then I just last week put out a post really calling out McKinsey for the fact that they had a conflict of interest in both writing federal climate policy in Canada while also working for the largest oil and gas lobbying firm in the country on the same topic, which was like carbon capture pathways. And so I was furious about that. And that's a very common example of greenwashing that happens when there are sectors with not a lot of transparency, they don't have to disclose on those kinds of things. Anyway, this is one of my favorite topics, and I'm just rambling, but thank you.
Oh my gosh, amazing, amazing. Thank you guys. So very quickly, and then I'll take like a question, two questions. Last rapid fire for all 3 of you. A lot of people in this room maybe have, what we call climate imposter syndrome, where it's like, you're in this work, but you're like, who am I to do anything in this work if I don't have X type of degree or X level years experience? Like, what is your advice to someone who really like want to do this work, but they just feel defeated. And, you know, what can keep them going if you have one piece of advice?
That's a great question. I would say to just try. I think that I think I said this earlier, but like you are the expertise of your own job. You probably have more knowledge in sustainability than you might think that you do. And even if you don't, just try to get something to change at your workplace. It'll give you really good hands-on experience, hands-on sustainability experience. So yeah, I would just encourage everyone to, if you want to stay in your job, I know not everyone wants to or can, but if you do like where you work or you want to stay where you work, think about the current skills and resources you have, the networks that you have, the leverage that you have, and think about how all of that can be used for climate action and find ways to connect climate to your role. Definitely check out our job function action guides at drawdown.org, which talk about actions that common corporate professions can take. You can also stop by our table to get them IRL. But yeah, I just want to say that this is like something you can do right now. You don't have to wait to get a climate job. You can take action in the job you already have.
Yeah, I would like to close with a metaphor that I often use for people, which is that in life, especially when you're young and then going through school and then going into the workplace, it can kind of feel like you're in a river and you're flowing along and sort of there's an established pathway in terms of where people to follow and sort of doors that you open through institutions that you're a part of. And then entering adulthood and going into the world can kind of feel like entering the ocean. And suddenly there's this huge expanse and you don't know where to go. And a lot of the time the instinct that people have, especially in business school, is to try and stay in the river. You want to follow an established path, see what other people have done, and sort of often that means replicating what your friends are doing, which oftentimes is like very standard careers. And it can feel very intimidating to think I'm just going to swim into the ocean and go off on my own track and create my own career, even though there's no established path and I don't know what I'm doing and I'm feeling very lost. And just embrace the uncertainty of that. It's very important to be able to be uncomfortable with the discomfort of not knowing what the future is, and that's okay, because especially in this world of extreme disruption, nobody knows what the future is, and it's very important to be adaptable and resilient in that way.
Yeah, first of all, climate knowledge itself is not that important once you're actually in that job. 1.5 just put out a really good report talking about like what are the skills that are most useful after actually getting the job, and it was like a negative score for like knowledge on climate, because that is not the skills, the day-to-day stuff. The second thing I'll say is it is a mindset, right? Like no matter what you're doing, there's gonna be someone that knows more, there's gonna be someone that does your job better, there's gonna be someone that does it worse, it's gonna know less, no matter what it is, climate or otherwise. So just keeping that in mind of like, it's not always about being the best at the thing or always about knowing the most. It's just about kind of showing up, I think goes a long way.
Amazing. And I would say, you know, my advice for everyone out there is that at the end of the day, we're not alone. I think sometimes a lot of these issues and this journey, especially along your career path, can feel very isolating. But I think that's when, you know, use these resources. Check out Drawdown Labs, check out Regeneration. Sorry, did I say that correctly? Regeneration. Check out Open Door Climate. Have these conversations. Collaborate across sectors. I think at the end of the day, this path is kind of building the plane while flying it. And we're all here to, you know, help each other build out those blueprints. So don't be afraid to ask people for help. Try to collaborate. And I think ultimately you'll find more answers along your path. So thank you guys for listening in on this. And we have time for one question right here.
So I'm wondering,
Can you say your name also
of
and your
course.
organization?
Hi, I'm Sarah Hill. I'm currently an outreach and response coordinator for Change the Chamber, Lobby for Climate, and the energy transition specialist for the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development. So after saying that mouthful, do you have any advice for someone like me transitioning from a part-time job to a full-time job, ideally with benefits and healthcare?
Yeah, I guess I'll just start. You write your resume. You know what I mean? I think a lot of us think about when we think about the work we're doing or the work that we've done, we feel like the amount of time we've spent on something should dictate how much of our resume that takes up. And I'm big on it's experience-based and project-based and skills-based. So if it's a part-time job that you've been doing, it's still the thing that you want to talk about. I think it should kind of dominate that type of narrative for resumes, for conversations, for how you look for work. That's just like a small tactical thing that I think.
I would say also, like, when you're doing interviews, the company's interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. And a lot of the time in nonprofit world, there can be some really toxic workplaces and toxic dynamics that are not really very clear from the flashy websites. And so it's very important to talk to people to know like what you're getting into, especially like in cultures where, especially in the nonprofit world, because it's mission driven, organizations have this idea that they can pay you less because there's this premium that is given to the psychological feeling of being like, oh, I'm in an impact-driven organization. That's BS. You need to be paid for what you're worth, and also, if the company really values you, they're going to provide things like healthcare and benefits. And so it's very important to talk to people that worked for them previously to understand the culture and have honest conversations about that, but also understand what they provide in terms of other benefits so you can make a better choice.
The only other thing I would add is, I don't know if you're looking to go into private or public sector, but regardless, I think that just being broad in terms of where you look, because there might be organizations or companies that don't look climate focused on the outside, but might still be related. Like, I'm thinking like public health organizations or like transit organizations, all these other things that relate to climate. Even within a company, there might be like, even if there isn't like a sustainability team, there might be sustainability related initiatives, and also being really clear that that's what you want to work on when you're interviewing. I spoke to one employee who is a technical writer for like a big tech company. When she was interviewing with them, she was very explicit, like, I see that you work on EVs and I want to be writing like the manuals for the EVs. So she was very explicit about wanting to work on the climate specific initiative within a company that isn't 100% climate focused.
Amazing. And last thing, could you all quickly plug the websites that you all were mentioning for the resources? For us, you guys can check out greenjobsboard.us and Green Jobs Board on social.
Turn my microphone off. Opendoorclimate.com, and then I'm just on LinkedIn, Daniel Hill.
Re-generation.ca.
And then you can check us out on drawdown.org.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, guys. That was really, really interesting. And I think it's quite important to know that we as a workforce, thank you. We as a workforce also have the power to change as a collective. So building into the next part, I want to invite Lucy, founder of Creative Start Climate, to talk about how she built her career. Now, I'm going to be transitioning into the DJ station so I can skip your slides.
Perfect. Does this work? Yep, perfect. That was fantastic, and it encapsulated a lot of my journey too, and probably a lot of your journeys, that these pathways aren't paved, and that's why sharing experiences is so important. So I have a bit of a quick fire, very short, how I built my climate career, and whoops, started a movement.
Trying to transition
slide.
now. Is it moving?
Cool,
There we
that's
go.
my name. So some context first, very quickly. Next slide. Just to kind of level set where we are, a moment in time. So for the last 200 years, the world has industrialized due to fossil fuel expansion. This is the world we're living in now. And the steam engine led to transport, which led to trade, which led to increased demand, which created needs for insurance, investment markets, and more. And our dependency and our livelihoods have been dependent on this economy, and this therefore has shaped technology and infrastructure and education and mindsets and behaviors to then expand this system. And I just want to hold space for this fact, because I knew this, but I only recently really emotionally engaged with it. So In 1982, Exxon scientists understood the correlation between fossil fuel extraction and temperature rise. And their own scientists predicted that by 2019, the Earth would rise in temperature by almost 1 degree. And then this study was then shelved, and they went on to intentionally create doubt about this correlation. So between 1982 and now, there's been a muddying of, is this happening? Is fossil fuel to blame? And so in 1987, I was born. And I'm angry about the fact that before I was born, the fossil fuel industry knew this fact. And so like many, I grew up all too aware that our dominant economic models are polluting our planet and robbing our future. And then I entered the workforce, and I came face to face with this disconnect that I felt between my values and my labor. I was using my powers to persuade, to influence, to manipulate audiences with my message. And the better I did my job, the more pollution I enabled. That's a pretty horrible feeling. So I went on this journey to detangle myself from the sharp end of capitalism. And in 2019, inspired by some actions by Extinction Rebellion, it's not for nothing that we have little green badges on our blazer, I hosted an event called Creatives for Climate, which was literally just an event in Amsterdam, held at Patagonia with leaders of the creative industries saying, hey guys, wake up. And this was a letter that we actually crafted together. This is an emergency of existential proportions. It's pretty tiring that 5 years on, our message is still the same. So over the last 5 years, we've grown from a self-funded initiative. So I just want to hold space for the fact that transitioning isn't always a cozy and rosy landing pad. There's a bit of sacrifice and sweat, unfortunately. And now we've grown to a global nonprofit org. And we've done things over the years like gather people around summits, experimentation around supporting other climate organizations with their creative calls to action, and then building our global hub. So that's kind of how I landed here. That's the very high level. And I just want to take a little bit to tell you what is Creatives for Climate. So earlier this week on Monday, it was really exciting that our kind of formerly radical activist community was actually recognized as the latest accelerator to the UN Race to Zero. That's so cool. And as Ursula mentioned, we are the largest, we've been doing this for a long time, and most diverse network of creatives specifically, so marketing, advertising, and PR professionals, but you're all welcome. Creativity belongs to everyone, using their persuasive powers for climate action. And why do we exist? Because in the face of the escalating crisis, the marketing, advertising, and PR industries remained intertwined with the world's most polluting sectors. So creativity, this beautiful power that all of us have, is being used often to greenwash and legitimize the growth of high-carbon clients. And recently, the UN Secretary General has called on mad men fueling the madness to divest from fossil fuels. The UN Secretary General has used this language. He said, fossil fuels are not only poisoning our planet, they're toxic for your brand. And I love that, speaking the language of industry, hit them where it hurts. Your sector, he said, is full of creative minds who are already mobilizing around this cause, gravitating towards companies that are fighting for our planet, not trashing it. Keep it up. So at Creatives for Climate, we're looking for those front runners. I know that there are creatives and agencies that want to go beyond fossil fuel divestment. Fossil fuel divestment is exactly where you need to start. But what more can we do? What more can we tackle? So we've been looking to tackle a lack of knowledge on greenwashing, because it can be pretty fuzzy out there, and I've been guilty of greenwashing, so it's okay if you say you've been guilty of greenwashing too. And a lack of confidence in climate communications. I'm not a scientist, I'm just a comms gal. We also want to tackle this business as usual education and career pathways, which you've heard a lot about, and a lack of opportunities and also competitive advantage for frontrunners. So we've got 3 solutions. The Creative Climate Hub, where we offer education pathways, the Ethical Agency Alliance, you're going to hear a little bit more about that, and creative partnerships, because I think it's really important that we actually meet people where they're at. We're going to help you get jobs, help you get clients. So let's dive into it. The Creative Climate Hub is a hub for change agents on educational pathways to transform the industry. So the only barrier to entry is that you commit to certain principles, and we actually created these in collaboration with our community. And these were informed in part by my own personal experience of becoming an activist, but also validating it with our members. So as a community, we think that active participation is really important. We commit to shaping the change we seek, bringing ideas, solutions, and energy to drive climate action efforts forward. I don't know if you've just seen, but we had Just Stop Oil activists, sent to jail for their actions, and there were a lot of discussions about tactics. I want there to be support for all climate action efforts. And I think that's really important, that we don't sit on the couch and we kind of criticize. Like, you gotta have some skin in the game. Collaboration is another one on the previous slide. So we commit to practicing radical collaboration to solve challenges no single person, agency, and organization can do it alone. And I have to say, there's a book, This Is Not a Drill by Extinction Rebellion, and there's one kind of message in that I found really empowering. And it's that the system that we live in is toxic, and therefore we need to hold space for the fact that a part of us is toxic. We are also being supported and conditioned to be competitive, but we are actually collaborative as humans. So I found that was really powerful, and I think it's really important to kind of, invite people to constantly challenge themselves as we, tackle this really important issue. Solutions, so we as a community commit to painting a picture of what we're fighting for, not just what we're fighting against. We know that doom and gloom doesn't mobilize people. We have a crisis of apathy and inaction. And I really want to hold space for intersectionality. We also recognize the intersectional nature of the challenges we face and commit to social justice as part of taking a systemic approach to climate action. It's not just about decarbonization now. And lastly, divestment from destruction. I'm sorry, but you can't be in this movement unless you recognize that you need to divest from working with big polluters, starting with fossil fuel clients. Now, that isn't the message of everyone else. That is the approach of our community. But lo and behold, our numbers are growing really quickly. So if you sign the commitment, you're in, you're a member, you get the badge, and you get access to pathways to learn new skills. Becoming a change agent, communicating climate change, tackling greenwashing, driving industry transformation. So we have courses on all of these, but we also have different ways to facilitate knowledge, peer-to-peer knowledge, webinars, dive in. It's really fun. I need to learn all the time. I'm not an expert in all of these things. I'm sure that you're not an expert in all of these things, so I'm really interested in creating the world's most kick-ass professional membership for people that are continuously learning to tackle this stuff. And lastly, we facilitate opportunities to lead. This isn't my movement, this is your movement. I want to create opportunities for this to be enough of a blank canvas that if you want to step up, if you're inspired, if you're like, hey, next week I want to have an event in Brooklyn, then you can just submit your concept and we'll support you. So this is an example of a community that were based in Lagos, Nigeria. They're holding a cake. It says Creatives for Climate. It's probably my most proud moment to date to see that kind of action happening. And yeah, we've been in 10 countries all across the world. So that's about bottom up within the industry, pressure from talent. So how can we create a voice for industry? What role can industry play in this transition? So we've been building an alliance of agencies that are willing to divest from fossil fuels, they're upskilling in anti-greenwash education, and they're collaborating to pioneer. So this has been recognized as a pathway to help agencies become change agents. It's called the Ethical Agency Alliance. And without kind of sharing too much about the details, our big goals are to see an adoption of fossil fuel divestment and a signal to other high carbon industries. We do need to start having a conversation around other industries. We want to see a mainstreamed anti-greenwash education and confidence on climate literacy so these agencies can start to take the right briefs and really tell the right stories. And we want to see a leadership position for adopting 1.5-degree aligned behavior. I've been in this movement long enough to speak to struggling founders that are like, yeah, but our margins are really tight. So it's like, okay, cool, let's work to solve that. Which brings us to creative partnerships. So matching the needs of our movement while quite literally feeding the collective with opportunities. So there's a lot that can be done here. We are taking the lowest lift option right now, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. It's essentially creating, a space for you to drop your opportunities and find the right talent. But what's come up time and again in our community is that creatives are struggling to find the right opportunities. And climate partners, quite frankly, we all know a climate organization that maybe could benefit from some more creative talent, are actually struggling to find the right credible talent. So nonprofits can't afford to be working with agencies that are also representing fossil fuel companies. So let's create a good list. So in the hub, you can join for free, you can access it, you can search for talent, promote your job, get support. We also have a boosted option. You can also submit agency briefs. We want to reward those frontrunners. And we've done a lot of collective activations in the past where we partner with climate orgs to mobilize the network in support of their cause. So yeah, since building this movement in 2019, quite honestly, we are a team of 4. I've gone really full-time since March. I had a business which I used to self-fund my hours. I am tired, but it's happening. I also had a baby during that time, so you can do it all. No, you really can't do it all. So what I've learned over 5 years, creating a united voice within the industry works and is gaining pace. That's not just us. That's everyone else that you heard here. That's every other climate nonprofit. That's non-proliferation, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. We're all aligned. There's one message: we gotta stop the extraction of fossil fuels. It's gaining pace and it works. Anti-greenwash education for creatives, or I would just say like climate education for creatives. We need things to be translated differently. We need it to be simple. We need it to be fun. It does build capacity and mostly confidence. The ability to speak up in a room and say, I don't know if that message is entirely accurate. A hub for collaboration, so whether that's with creatives or agencies, drives innovation and solutions that work in practice, not just in theory. And rewarding leadership is a climate solution. It brings along the laggards and it drives new opportunities. And change is happening. So The Hague has recently become the world's first city to pass a law banning fossil fuel-related ads. We've seen big agencies like Harvest be stripped of their B Corp certification because of their representation of major polluters like Shell, and initiatives like ours and others that are creating pathways for solutions. The IPCC report has recognized collective action as a solution to accelerate policy and systems change. When I started this journey, I was looking for a quick fix, some green skills. We do need to mobilize and have a united voice. That is really important. We are powerful together, and I feel like we need to reiterate that again and again, people power. And I just want to offer this framework that when I think about systems change, I often think about the Berkana 2 loops. And essentially, you have a dominant system, a polluting system, that right now is the dominant system, but it's in collapse. And so we have to hold space for this idea that there is an emergent system. And there are lots of different players that are working on this emergent system. And actually, individually, we're not very strong, because this dominant system is so strong, it's going to eat us up. So it's only through networks and collaboration that we can be strong and together build this emergent system. And that's what I'm really holding on to. So yeah, I'm really proud to build this inclusive movement for change, and I think we'll be ending with a little video. One of our recent actions at Cannes Lions, we did this action, produced it, finished the video on the same day. So like maybe there's some edits that are like slightly less than perfect, but I hope you enjoy, and after this we'll transition to the next panel.
I'm Agent J. Well, Joshua Kappa, and I'm with Creatives for Climate at Cannes Lions. And I'm on the lookout for brands, agencies, marketers who are being a little bit mythical with their sustainability goals. Yes, that's right, I am on the greenwash.
Greenwashing is making yourself look good while doing the nasty underneath, basically.
Using sustainability topics to create the impression that a company, for example, is active in climate preserving activities when they're not.
Essentially, it's how when firms try to backpedal on their commitments on climate.
I think H&M does that. They use a lot of green colors and say that they're more sustainable and recycling, but I don't think they are.
Well, I think greenwashing is a word that's been captured by people doing things that are purporting to be something, but they're not.
I'm absolutely convinced that advertising agencies have to do it, because we need proper storytelling to get the behavioral change that we so desperately need in society.
At the end of the day, we are only going to have healthy businesses if we have healthy societies and healthy planets. And business can play a big, big role in doing that. Governments can't do it alone, civil society can't do it alone. We're going to need businesses to engage in this agenda.
The creative industry is ready to talk about it very, very strongly. Sustainability is one of the two topics they're talking about, AI and sustainability.
Yes, we are very much around like how can we bring in everything from don't use your plastic water bottles.
Do you have an audit on the kinds of clients that you would represent in order to support them to grow? For example, fossil fuel clients?
That I'm not sure I can respond to.
Thank you so much. What's your stand on having an audit on the kinds of clients that agencies represent? So, for example, fossil fuel clients.
At the end of the day, how the agencies engage with their clients is for each individual agency to decide on what their approach is.
What's holding back change?
Money. I think, fear and greed are holding back change. And, that's all around people having short-term thinking of gain now, because who knows what tomorrow will bring, when we're actually responsible for making tomorrow.
So, now you've heard the conversations, the responsibility is in your hands. Using our new tool, the Greenwash Swatch, you can identify greenwashing, snap a picture of it, and call it out on social media with the hashtag GreenwashWatch. The future is in your hands. Choose wisely.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for this. I think we are all really, really excited. And to tap into what Lucy was talking about building her career, I want to invite Rachel from Grist on the stage, because now we are diving into the second panel of this evening around what are the skills needed in this sector and how creativity is a force for climate action. So big applause for Rachel.
Thank you so much. We can go ahead and get our panelists on up here as well. We've got a fabulous panel, but before we kick out, you can come on up. Yeah. Yes, there we go. Great, beautiful transition. Good me. All right, I'd love to hear who here in the audience would self-describe as a creative. Yeah, so a good, decent portion. I'm seeing some of this. Who here would describe themselves as a creative person? Okay, most of you. So what we're going to be talking about in our panel, which I will be introducing our panelists in just a moment, is how to leverage creativity to drive that systemic change that Lucy was talking about. So we've touched a bit on how to find your place in the climate movement, how to find your climate job. Now we're going to talk about how to leverage those skills, the temperament of being a creative person, the way that our minds operate as creative people, how to leverage that to move the systems that hold us all back in the direction of a just and sustainable future. So as Ursula said, I am with Grist, and Grist is a nonprofit media organization dedicated to telling the story of a just and sustainable future. So in the interest of storytelling, after I so gracefully welcomed you all to the stage, I'd love to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and storytell a little bit around their own journeys to climate action. So we'll start right here. Just give us your name and a short story about how you got to be here.
Can you hear me? Yes. Hi, I'm Jessie Bluedorn. I'm the founder and director of the Carmack Collective. My climate journey was kind of a weird one. Maybe some of you relate to that. I started out my career in digital media and event production, and I moved to New York in 2016, right after I finished undergrad, to start my first big girl job at a digital agency. And again, as many of you may have experienced, 2016 was a very politically radicalizing year with the election of Donald Trump. It was also a personal turning point for me because I was living on my own for the first time, and I was starting to reckon with the fact that I was set to inherit a lot of money, and I didn't know what that meant and how that connected with my values and how I wanted to exist in the world. Around the same time, I started to find community, again, so important, in organizations that did donor organizing, like Women Donors Network, as well as jumping feet first into the youth climate movement, which was really growing at that time. I organized with the Sunrise Movement in the early years. And then by 2019, I wanted to work full-time in climate. I felt like that's where I needed to be. We were in a really important moment. And so I went to work full-time as a climate organizing fellow at 350.org. Fast forward a little bit, by 2021, I felt like I was ready to weave all of these strands together. I think I was missing some of the creativity in my organizing work, but I was missing the climate work. in my creative work, and I wanted to bring it all together and figure out what my unique value add was. So in 2021, we started to develop the project that became the Carmack Collective, and we formally launched in 2023. And just to give you a little bit of a sense, the Carmack Collective is a philanthropic family fund that is focused on combating and dismantling the fossil fuel industry, which we see as the largest obstacle to a climate-just future. Yeah.
You can clap for that.
Boo.
For
Boo,
sure.
fossil fuel industry. We're coming for you. Yeah, and we do that by making grants to movement building and culture change organizations who are working on the front lines. And I'm going to wrap it up there and pass it on.
That's wonderful. Well, so go to Isaias.
Yeah, so nice to see you again, Jesse. My name is Isaias Hernandez. I am an environmentalist and also a media creator behind the platform Queer Brown Vegan. My story into doing climate action today is like growing up in Los Angeles in poverty as a first-generation queer Mexican individual. I didn't really know what environmentalists look like. And when you think about environmentalists, you often think about white people. You don't think about Black environmentalists, indigenous environmentalists, POC. So from a media lens, I was very consuming this culture of like what it means to be an environmentalist. So when I went to Berkeley and I was trained as an environmental scientist in 2018, I remember I got rejected from the biggest, greenest NGOs. Like I made it to the final interviews from like 350, Nature Conservancy, WWF, Greenpeace, all of these amazing orgs as a digital media strategist. That was like my dream role, to be an environmentalist. That's what I thought it meant to work at an environmental job. And when I got rejected from it, I ended up getting a job at a creative agency in New York City, working a lot with editorial brands and like luxury brands. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me to explore storytelling through the brand and advertising lens. But for me, I think my huge passion was always science, education, accessibility, because I had this huge passion to teach young people who are people of color that grew up in poverty, that didn't have access to equitable education to learn this, and that I don't believe that you need a science degree to be an environmentalist. Like that's something that should be deconstructed. And so when I created Queer Brown Vegan in 2019, it was a very simple goal to educate people on environmental literacy, to teach people what it meant. And it's been my full-time job since 2020, doing that. And it's been a very difficult journey of understanding, like, how can you present climate media literacy to corporations, institutions, nonprofits, and work and consult with these environmental NGOs today to really make a really safe and ecologically sound future for younger people while we see the rise of disinformation and misinformation. And so wanting to showcase to younger people that there are alternative careers in media, and that is within climate.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isaias. Heather?
Hello? Yes. Yeah, I started as a filmmaker, actually. So I grew up in a small mountain town called Big Bear Lake. It's about 2 hours away from Los Angeles, and I went to film school in Los Angeles, became a filmmaker, started working on lots of different types of sets and projects, but for the most part, I can honestly say I really hated everything I was putting out in the world. The last big set that I worked on, I was a production designer for, and essentially I needed to change my job when a girl screamed and her clothes fell off for no apparent reason in this awful, awful, terrible horror movie that I was working on, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need substance. So I went back to school. I studied media and social impact, and I had the opportunity to work for the artist Mark Bradford. And I started to work in really marrying art and film with community building and movement building and advocacy work. And so I got to work in the Italian prison system, working on restorative justice and working on a media campaign there in support of Mark's work. And what I learned there, I really transformed into storytelling about systems, which is actually really difficult to do. And so my career then led me to telling stories about the healthcare system, continuing in the incarceration system here. And then I became a teacher, so I sort of curricularized what I learned, and I became a professor of media and social impact at Cal State LA. I continued working in the film industry, however, and was working on set, looked up, and there was a giant plume of wildfire smoke in the sky. Climate change had always been really personal for me. It was something that, we're a small mountain town that I grew up in. The lake was shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. The fires were growing and growing and growing every summer. So to me, climate really felt like a right now problem, and I couldn't understand how, working in the industry that I was, no one was speaking about it. Nobody was telling any transformative stories about it. And so I then decided to pivot into environment. And so now I work for the Redford Center, which is an environmental filmmaking nonprofit that funds environmental films as a part of the Sundance family of organizations. And I'm a co-founder of the Hollywood Climate Summit, which levels up the enthusiasm around climate action in Hollywood and storytelling and raises up the environmental literacy of storytellers.
Awesome. And Farhana.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is this working? Good, good. I
think so.
Yeah, thank you. I realize I may be the oldest person in this room, and I've had a climate career since 1991, but my intro to that point really came via social justice struggles. So as a 14 and a 15 and a 16-year-old and throughout university, I was active in the peace movement, in the feminist movement. I campaigned against nuclear missiles called cruise missiles. I campaigned with Rock Against Racism. So that history has really informed my decision to become a lawyer. So I became a lawyer after qualifying, and by chance, and serendipity and luck plays a big part in all our lives. And I think, please don't forget that. It's all very well to have lots of intentions, but life also deals you good curveballs too. So in my case, my law firm was seconding people to a new charity set up in 1989 that was advising small island states at the beginning of what were the UN negotiations on a climate treaty. And that treaty was concluded in 1992. And I became part of the support, providing legal advice and support, from carrying bags, preparing briefings, preparing notes, eventually fundraising and being part of the strategy team to many, many different delegations. And I have been to the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, to the subsequent ones. I've helped negotiate the Kyoto Protocol, the carbon markets, and the Paris Agreement. And I came up with the idea of the overarching goal to complement the 1.5 threshold was the net zero by 2050 reduction target, and that to be as binding as possible, as quickly as possible, but I've also taken part in that. So my other part of my journey is been in philanthropy, because I've spent so much time working with people on the front line, with communities on the front line who literally did not have a voice and a seat at the table and often couldn't get to that table, i.e. the UN negotiations that I've participated in. So about half of my 30 plus years I've spent in philanthropy and climate philanthropy, and that's where I sit now. And I think that climate philanthropy is both a massive opportunity for making sure that we have an inclusive movement, that we have a movement based on trust, on solidarity, and with the involvement of all of the sectors that we need to live in a more just, a more caring world. But it frankly, and I'll end on this, I realize I've taken a bit of a long time, but it's also the problem. So philanthropy lives and works off the 500 years of accumulated debt that has come about as a result of the huge and massive wealth inequities. And those wealth inequities were built on slavery, colonialism, imperialism. And so it's not the case that industrialization, and this is a tiny little corrective to the presentation by Lucy, which was so compelling, but unless you remember that from the 1527 onwards, millions of people were enslaved, brought over in the case of the US. My country, I come from Pakistan, was invaded and taken over by the British, and the rest of the world was carved up by essentially the European powers. And that is where the wealth of many of the industries, many of the foundations, many of the countries that are now rich comes from. And so unless and until we tackle and dismantle all those systems together and know that that is where the system is, and we all live inside this system, no one is outside it, we're all in it, and at the same time trying to change it. So I really look forward to turning it back to you and, supporting all of us come to how we do that day by day.
Yeah, and I saw you. Yes, thank you. And I think what we're here to talk about is the way that each of us as individuals are responsible for bringing our gifts to shift the systems that we exist within. So because, you touched on it in your introduction of yourself, I'd love to hear a little bit from you, Jesse, on how you feel about philanthropy as someone who is working within it and what your relationship is to nudging that system from the inside, from your current position.
I share a lot of your same feelings. I probably won't say it as eloquently. I think the impetus behind the Carmack Collective and my work is a redistribution of wealth back into movements and frontline actors who are driving a more equitable and just future. I think there's a lot that could be improved on in philanthropy. Since we're in sort of a solutions mindset, I'll say a couple of practical things. One, famously only 2% of global philanthropic dollars annually go to climate initiatives. Come on, that's crazy, right? So we need more money, but I also want to highlight that only a really small fraction of that 2% is going to climate justice efforts and climate narrative and change efforts, which we're here to talk about today. So we need to be doing more, and we need to make sure we're doing it, putting it in the right places within the movements. And I think not only how much we fund, but also how we fund matters. So leaning into what we're calling trust-based philanthropy in the movement, where we trust our frontline partners, they know what needs to be done, they're leading the work, and we trust them to do it without heavy application requirements, heavy reporting requirements, et cetera. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you're a funder, give multi-year grants. It can go a long way. Any organizers, any activists in the room know having that stability is huge, and you have the money to do it, your foundation. So those are some of the things we're thinking about.
That's great. That's great. Yes. I'd love to hear a little bit from you, Isaiah. At least my experience of your career started out with following you on social media and loving the content that you create with your individual account, but I know you consult and you work within various industries to help move the needle on the systems, from that perspective. So I guess what I'd love to hear a little bit from you, with your social media work, you're moving people's minds and hearts and changing systems that way. And then with your consulting work, you're changing systems from inside organizations. How do you balance those two? And what does it feel like to work within those two kind of arenas?
Yeah, I think younger people today have much more independence to pursue things. So I think for me, what the brand stands for can explore different realms of which a traditional NGO can't say. If we talk about from a geopolitical perspective, right, a lot of organizations are constricted to not be able to say certain things. However, at QBV, we're able to say things that may not be in agreement to what the dominant Western narratives are putting out there. And I'm very proud to be able to build that international solidarity with other communities. But I think when it comes to consulting, brands and institutions and orgs, I think the biggest issue that organizations are really fixated on are always the impact of the reach. So how do we continue to funnel in these large amounts of mass views, right? Because at the end of the day, I've met people who can reach millions of people per video, but I've also seen them produce events where they get less than 10 people for events. And I think that to me, when I think about producing things for organizations, it's storytelling can also exist within production of events. And that's one of the avenues that we kind of do with nonprofits and organizations is that, I co-created the Symbioscene. My co-founder is based in London over there. And we focus on cultural arts and summits and micro-satellites events and also implementation of productions of business conferences from TED Countdown, Bloomberg Green, to reinvent the wheels of how we're discussing these things. I think some of the consulting projects that I'm limited to is the roles of what I'm able to say at times. And I do think that it is a bit frustrating, but I do think that it has also given me an agency of mine where I'm treated better as a consultant than an employee. And I definitely have seen those power dynamics of nonprofit employees being mistreated versus consultants are treated way better. But I also think that it's important that there is this sense of transparency of like accelerating those discourses. So making sure that, you know, why are certain groups of investment of money going into these, in my view, some mediocre events that are not reaching the right people, or if you're trying to expand your audience size beyond climate, why aren't you thinking about Latin spaces, LGBT spaces, like marginalized spaces, like tapping into different cultural elements is super important, I think, for younger generations. And I think we're seeing how in 2018, when I applied to jobs in nonprofits, they said Instagram is useless and that Facebook and email marketing was the only thing for social media, which is horrible, right? Because now it's like, well, now they're reaching out to me to do their video. So I think it has changed culturally, but I do think there's a lot of push that needs to be done.
Yeah, and yes. And I also think something that you touch on a lot with your work, particularly on social media, is the fact that that climate is an intersectional issue, right? Climate is a social justice issue, it is a racial justice issue, it is a gender justice issue. And one of the things I early on appreciated about your account is that you didn't leave that out. You showed up as your full self to what you were creating. And I think that's something that I really want to, that this panel is uniquely designed to kind of impart, is that we each have our own unique kind of identities and skill sets that we show up to the table with. And it's about finding our place. And so I'm going to pivot to you, Heather, because Hollywood is not a problematic place at all, is it? And you talk about that movie that you were on where the woman's clothes dropped off at a snap of a hat for no reason at all. What is it like to work within that environment day after day trying to move the needle on those systems?
That's such a great question. I think that Hollywood represents, as Farhana put very eloquently, entrenched systems that sometimes feel impenetrable. And Hollywood is an environment that can feel like an invite-only space. And so I think that I firmly believe that change does not happen from the top down. Change starts in the grassroots. And in thinking about an entertainment and media ecosystem, that means independent voices. That means underrepresented voices facing equity barriers to accessing Hollywood, or even the skills to be able to participate in media creation. And so I think a lot of what my work has been, both in the education space, but also in creating a community, is to make sure that we're creating an accessible space. So when I started caring about climate in the context of making media, there were a few spaces I could participate in to get climate information. As a creator, we don't have secondary climate education. We don't know what to say. We don't want to say the wrong thing. There were some spaces we could participate in, but to be honest, those cost about $3,000 to go to a conference, which is absolutely inaccessible to somebody that's working on a below-the-line job. But I know that working in a below-the-line job in Hollywood, read the full credits that roll during a film, every single one of those people made a creative decision that's influencing the full story. So there's a lot of focus on executives or writers or showrunners, but I can tell you that the person who envisioned the visual effects made a decision about what our future looks like. The person that picked the props made a decision about what materially that character values and thus what we value as a society. So there are a number of people that have positions of power, whether we perceive them as that or not. And so in building the Hollywood Climate Summit, it was let's collide climate understanding, activists, voices, experts, scientists, frontline leaders, to be able to come and educate all of us on an equal playing field, and there shouldn't be any barriers to entry. So we've created a space that for the first several years was completely free to join and access. We've live streamed it out for free. We share all of the content after the fact, because everyone who is a creator in this economy, which by the way bridges far beyond Hollywood, and Hollywood actually has some of the less power in the media ecosystem at this point. More people are watching YouTube, flocking to social media. There are independent media ecosystems, and everyone deserves to have access to leveling up their climate knowledge and understanding, and the unique power that they have in communicating it out. So I think it's letting everyone in, letting everyone have power, and making sure that you're holding that line and not not really taking for granted that, yes, it's an exclusive space, but we're creating an inclusive space, and that in itself is challenging the system.
Thank you. Yeah. Now, Farhana, you've been working in climate, as you said, since 1991, is that right? And so in that time, we're all here because we want to move the needle and change the systems. In that time, I'd love to hear if there is a change that you've seen that is now in retrospect feels heartening, so that, in the 20 years from now, we're able to think back on what changes maybe we have been able to see.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you're all here, and there are, probably in this hall alone, dozens, if not hundreds of initiatives and organizations trying to bring a whole set of stakeholders and actors and people in is really amazing. And I guess back in 1991, I was influenced as a lawyer and as a scientist. I also participated in the science reports by very much truth will speak to power, and that model that we thought that the truth, the scientific truth, would, in the form of reports, assessment reports, be taken seriously by our politicians. And we did not really understand the degree to which the vested interests would completely play a different script, and use dirty tricks and play a different script altogether, and we were outplayed. So the fact that actually we had science and disinformation and denial and very deeply organized strategies to undermine regulation by politicians all across the world is something that I regret and feel I was really naive back in 1991. I was in my 20s too then, and so I feel
Thank you for thinking
you guys,
anybody's in their 20s.
What is happening now that is of that scale? What do I think is heartening now? It is the introduction and the understanding of every sector is complicit and every sector has agency, and you are part of something as adults. Even if you choose not to be employed, you are still active in the system somewhere and you have agency. So I think the sector that I wish we were talking a little bit more about is the gaming sector. The gaming sector is where the creatives are all going. It's the largest sector, and it dwarfs now the industry, Bollywood, Hollywood, Nollywood combined. It is where young people, and adults too, although we're not seen as that, spend most of our leisure time and a lot of our money, and it's time. And it's the sector. It's where I feel right now I wish we were there more in that community, informing, dreaming, creating, because that sector is more closely linked, I feel, to agency. It's where people can do stuff. That's why it's appealing. And they can do stuff, and they like that, because I say they, I have 4 children, they're all doing all of these, and I watch. I think the world as it is has left us disenfranchised and feeling we are useless or impotent or we're not being heard. And in the world of gaming, you can control that. So I feel like you asked me what is heartening. I feel also that there are some really massive and positive changes going on. And that, frankly, is where, the creatives here and through you need to make the biggest difference of all, because the reach of that is so big. The reach of that is so big at the moment, and I don't want us to, lose that moment and wake up in another 10 years thinking, why didn't we involve all those gamers as well as the YouTube and TikTokers and all of those?
I think that's fascinating. And, I'm playing Dave the Diver right now, and there's some very problematic climate storylines in that. So I think, in following that thread, what are the opportunities that you all see in using creativity to push systemic change? What are the kind of areas that you're like, I'm not seeing something here, and I think it could be really, really, really meaningful? And I'll let you, if anybody has an idea and wants to shout it out, they can start.
I might start first. I feel like the biggest positive thing that I see, which is really systemic and is really transformational, and those words get bandied around a lot, but is value shift, is shift in values and norms. That is what we think is system change, really. everything else, like at the level of policies or projects or initiatives, is not changing the system. It is an incremental step, and no doubt many improvements result from that. But actually, the biggest thing that people can do, and I feel like all of us in this space can really hold on to, is how is what I'm doing changing the value system underneath. So it's stuff like consumption. Are we still feeding consumption as a way of feeling good, being validated, having a worthy life? And if the answer is yes, you're not really doing system change. You're reinforcing that very fundamental hold that the system has on us. So I would say let's all of us, try and see how that works. And the second one, I think, is about solidarity and community and being in a place. For too long, we've kind of lived in our heads, and we've, placed a lot of store in intellectual, theoretical worlds and ways of dealing with things, instead of leading with our hearts and our bodies. And that's much more fundamental as well. And I feel like somehow we've got to get to grips with that and hold each other in communities better and hold ourselves in communities better.
Yeah, I'd love to build on that. Oh, gosh. Go ahead. I was reflecting on this question, and I think that we're in a place called the marketplace of the future, and we're talking about how to grow creativity. And I think that we often have a lot of conversations about the power of story and what we can do. And I'm going to take a ventured guess that I don't need to convince anyone in this room. They're probably bought into that idea. But I think we need to do a little bit of a better job advocating for ourselves, for the value of that work. And I think we need to grow the creative climate economy. And what I mean by that is that there's several ways that we're all participating in what is valued in the world right now. And there's several ways that we're casting votes every day. Obviously, the first is our voting power, right? That's something that we obviously need to exercise. That's influencing power. That's influencing where money is being allocated. It's influencing what our systems are ultimately responding to. The second is, what are you giving your attention to? And I can tell you that on the other side, when we're advocating for things to get funding or support, they're looking at the metrics of what are people watching, who are people following, what are people paying attention to. And so you need to cast that vote more consciously and follow people like Isaiah's and follow people like Christy who are here and pay with your vote, with a follow, with a giving your time and screen time to that data really matters on the other side of getting things funded. And the other way is, how are you buying things? And if you're not somebody that's buying creativity, I think you need to ask yourself that as a creator. Are you paying artists? Are you buying things that are made by people, by imagination? Are you spending your dollar on things that are going to increase the value of the work that we're saying that we believe in? And if the answer is no, I'm not going and buying a ticket to that climate documentary, then how do you think more climate documentaries are going to be made? I'm over here advocating, trying to say that these are important, but if you're not showing up, if you're not watching, if you're not paying $1 to go to the movie theater, I can't convince anyone that that has monetary value in this broken capitalist system. So, vote with your dollar, vote with your attention, and vote with your vote, please, very soon. But I think that that's really what we need to grow the creative value of the potential that we have here. And one other thing, creatives need to be in more spaces than creative spaces. Go into places where decisions are being made and show them the value of what creativity can be in moving advocacy forward and moving thinking about fixing systems forward.
Yeah, that was great. Isaiah, I saw you shake your head when Heather told people to follow you, but really they should because you're fantastic. But what's your response?
Yeah, I mean, is this working? Yeah, good. Okay. I always tell people, strive for ecological wealth over generational wealth. Like in America, we're taught this lie of the American dream, building generational wealth for your family. But it's very, again, nuclear and very individualistic of centering the continued existence of select few versus for me, it's I can no longer think about accumulating generational wealth in my lifetime, but I can see a future with ecological wealth where I can see the continued well-being systems of the species and people around me. I'm looking into alternative models of like what it means to raise a family, what it means to own a home. Like me and my best friend were talking about buying a home together because we're like, in this economy, we can't afford it. And like, I think there's obviously different modalities of how that works, but I also like to say, like what Heather was saying, is that I meet a lot of creatives that don't know the business language. Unfortunately, you can't just come up here and cry on stage or say something, be like, pay me now. It's not going to work because unfortunately in many business rooms, that's not the language that they care to hear. And I think that having to, mentor a lot of young people and reminding them the skill sets of like, when you approach a friend or you're trying to meet a new friend, you don't just throw your resume of like, these are the skill sets that make me a good friend. You sit down and ask them like, who are you? What's up? How's your heart? And like get to know them. And I think there was a thing that said about collaborate for creatives, which I agree, but you do not need to collaborate with everyone. There are certain people who do not have the same values and skill sets that truly value collaboration, and some people who cannot deliver upon that. So when you collaborate with people, it's people that are friends with you, that you can recognize their skill sets that they can place forth, because if you choose to collaborate with everyone, you're setting yourself up for failure and also disappointment with people. And so I think for me, it's like that was the biggest lessons that I tell creatives is like, put your story out there. Who cares if you don't have any followers? You don't know who's going to read it one day and find it years later, but also collaborate with people who you truly see yourself with versus I'm trying to get 100 people to follow me. It's like, I just want one person to build with out of each room, and that's it.
That's awesome. All right, and Jesse, what about you? What's needed to drive the systemic change?
Yeah, something I've been thinking a lot about and has become a real focus for us at the Carmack Collective is the role of comedy in driving climate action. Yeah. Okay, I hear some sounds. I think it's often a little bit unexpected. It's like, this is a very serious issue. Why would we be laughing at this? But I think it's also so important to find joy in the work. A lot of us are burned out and struggling, and a lot of research does show that comedy is a way that lowers people's guard. It welcomes them in. It doesn't feel like you're preaching at them or yelling at them. It's something they want to watch, they're having fun. Yeah, so I think that's been really exciting. I can give you guys an example. Shout out to Heather and the Hollywood Climate Summit. We partnered on an amazing event earlier this week where Amy Westerfelt from Drilled Media presented about the PR and ad industry and its toxic history with fossil fuels. And several comedians joined the panel on stage. And it was incredible. It was very serious, heavy-hitting investigative journalism, informing the public, and I was crying, laughing the whole time. I think people really loved it, and it's just such a great example of like bringing together all of these pieces that we're talking about, like bringing joy, bringing knowledge, information, including creatives in unexpected places, and yeah.
I love that. I love that. All right, so I think we have some time for some audience questions. Do we need to give a mic? Oh, we've got one. Okay, sorry. All right. So anybody from the audience have a question for our fantastic panel? And if you don't, I could talk to these folks for like the next 45 minutes, so. No audience quest. Oh, we've got one. Okay, great.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you all so much for a really engaging discussion. My name is Celestina. I'm a producer here in New York City of eco artists as well as social justice oriented artists. But I wanted to ask you all actually about, most of us are creatives here, and most of us, share the same values and are working within the same capitalist system. So I'd love to hear all of you talk about on the concept of failing upwards or failing better. It's a quote from Bertolt Brecht where he says, try, fail, try again, fail better. So I'd love to hear all of you talk about like an instance in your career where you engaged with failure and then failing better. Thank you.
Awesome, great question. I know I'm not on the panel, but I have a great example. When I was in my early 20s, I moved to New York to study improv at UCB, and which is the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, and got my first paying improv gig teaching pharmaceutical sales reps how to use comedy to sell drugs to doctors. And I showed up to the gig, and I did it, and I got done with that gig. And even though I was, in my 20s and not particularly lit up about stuff yet, I knew, like, this is not how I want to be spending my time and my talents. And I loved, in the first panel today, someone was talking about, like, find what you have to offer and then find the place for it. And so I started thinking about my skill set, which is as putting on a show. And I found my way into producing events for nonprofit media organizations and eventually to producing climate events. Just thinking about, what do I know how to do? What do I care about? Where does the intersect of the need of what I care about and what I know how to do exist? And it didn't take that long, relatively. It only took 10 years to transition from that nightmare job to now. And 10 years relatively is not a long time. So anyway, I'd love to hear from you, Jesse, if you've got an example as well. Farhana, you've got an example?
Do you have an example?
I guess. Look, I feel I am a Muslim, a migrant, a woman of color, and in the 80s and 90s, when I was the age that many of you are here, smashing glass ceilings, succeeding, having those big shoulder pads, being a career working girl, Melanie Griffiths, think me, was really good. And we did make some gains, but those were very partial gains. And likewise, the green and environmental movement that I was part of, we wanted to get treaties and legislation done, and we thought that would be great, job done, which it was in certain treaties, that helped. So I feel there's a constant cycle of learning and unlearning that things did work. We have stopped 6 degrees of warming, and we are on the cusp of a major energy and sustainability revolution only in the space of 30 years. So don't be so hard on yourselves and be kind to yourselves. And I guess that's one of the messages I feel continually learning, unlearning, trying hard. I reinforce what you've said completely. It's a beautiful truth. And being humble about it is also a very good thing, to not think that we're going to get to this perfect world in the future, but the messiness of the present one is enough. And that it's okay also to feel joy and grief and envy and sadness and all of the other emotions, jealousy and rage and, assholes abound in movements too. They're not just in the corporate world, by the way. So it's like, we have to deal with all of that stuff. And so that's what I would say. Yeah, that's very true. And just be prepared for that. It's not like you're going to find a workplace that's going to be perfect. And I guess that's where I feel like my youngest children are sort of 17, 22, and they have such a different attitude to the workplace. It's very healthy, much healthier, I think, than thinking that your colleagues are going to be basically your movement family, your actual family, provide you with meaning, provide you with a perfect career opportunity, all the rest of it. So I think letting go of some of those assumptions is a very good thing.
I love that. Anybody else?
I would just add, I think it's very important to let go of perfectionism. I think that's something that holds a lot of us back. It's like, I have to get it exactly right before I do anything. I don't want to mess up the climate science. I don't want to embarrass myself. Obviously, you should, try your best, do some work, but I think oftentimes it's better to do something than nothing. And to your point, you have to do the first thing to figure out what did and didn't work so you can fail better. And so I think I would just encourage everyone, I encourage myself every day in the mirror to just try to get out there and do it. Sort of mediocre white men in the fossil fuel industry feel free to do it every day, so you should too.
Fantastic. All right. I think now we've got a whole bunch of questions. All right, do we have time to take them, Ursula? I guess we do. That's great.
Thank you. I'm Diana, and thank you for all your amazing comments. I would like to know if you have any advice of how to change narratives of success, because to create systemic change, as you talked about, we need to change the narrative of what success is, also in philanthropy and economic and in life success. So do you have any idea for us creatives, for you?
That's a great question.
I'll just add an anecdote, I guess. I feel like an area that I'm interested in us changing and redefining success is that we've seen, specifically in narrative, that's where I'm going to come from, this hero's journey of an individual that accomplishes everything on their shoulders. And I actually think that's a really toxic narrative. To undertake this work alone, it's actually really draining and probably leads to burnout. And so I think that we really need to see narratives of communities navigating these problems, tackling conflict, crisis. And I also think that we need to show narratives of plurality, meaning that two things can be true. You and I can disagree, and we also have a common goal that we need to find a way to work together towards. And I think seeing that both in the context of multiple protagonists, ensemble casts, just communities really having different perspectives but coming together towards a definition of success, whatever that is in the context of your story, I think those are the skills we actually are lacking the most in real life to navigate the conflicts and challenges that we're facing. We need to see one another disagree and still move forward, see one another compromise and all get what we need out of it, maybe not exactly what we wanted out of something. And I think that if we could grapple with that as a type of success, I think that would really help, especially as we're talking about climate, for a lot of the interpersonal ways that we can redefine success for how we're approaching this together.
I love that. Farhana, you want to add?
That's a brilliant question. And precisely this issue of what are the fundamental norms that dominate our own thinking and that we've all orientated our lives unwittingly or, with intent around. And I feel that our societies currently are dominated by success measured in terms of materialistic acquisition, and they're dominated by power over others in how you can influence and coerce, have over them. And we need to lose those metrics for ourselves and in our wider societies. And the metrics of success for me are about caring. So caring, whether it's for the planet or other people, has always been undervalued. And it's always associated with women and with people of color and indigenous people. So they're also undervalued. It's which comes first, chicken or egg. So caring is hugely undervalued in the current economic system, and that's why those jobs of caring, whatever they are, whether it's caring for children, the elderly, caring for your community, they are unpaid. So actually there are many theoreticians, feminists, those who are differently abled who've challenged these and are putting forward, more radical solutions for a universal minimum wage and for wages for housework, which was a 40-year-old campaign. And the other thing that's very undervalued is, of course, creativity and imagination. So just a tiny anecdote. I have a sort of unfinished business in this place because my parents and my school at the age of 18, when I was 18, made me drop my art course, which I was just about to also graduate in, complete, because they said it was useless and it wouldn't give me and get me a job. And so they said, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be an accountant, be a dentist, be any of these things. But, what's this fazul, it's seen as useless subject for? So I think these things must become metrics of success, like imagining, helping yourself realize your own creativity, being of service to others are I think the fundamentals. And as I am a bit older, I read lots of stuff and my Instagram feed is full of what should you think about in terms of legacy and what do people who die, really value? And nobody values material success or power, actually. No one says, I wish I had more of those. They always value the love that they have given and the love that they have received in general.
All right. I think that's a beautiful, but we've got more time? No, we're out of time? Okay, I think that's a beautiful button to end on. So thank you enormously to our fantastic panel. Thank you to our audience for being here. And is there anything, just finally, where can people find you? Anybody have, we have Hollywood Climate Summit, Queer Brown Vegan, Carmack Collective. Where can people find you, Farhana?
Oh, the Climate Justice and Just Transition Donor Collective, and our Ask. You know, I didn't talk so much about my work, but this is a project which is trying to find and support those organizations working primarily in the Global South, but often in solidarity with many others in the Global North. So please take a screenshot, go to the website, and contribute by providing examples or supporting these organizations. So thank you for putting up that and giving me one minute to plug that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Turn it over to Ursula.
Thank you so much, guys. Wow, lots of things to learn up until here. It's fine. It's fine, it's fine. It's the party here. So we are diving into the last part of our summit today, and it's basically a zooming into the industry in transition. Now, I want to invite to the stage to Lucy, who's going to walk us through these.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ursula. You're going to grab the slides. We have one final thing. Your attention, please. Feeling a bit extra. I'm really excited about curating these conversations because I need to learn about the content too. So if we could go to the next slide. We're going to start to... I'm really bad at this housekeeping stuff. But Gareth, you're my appointed leader. Okay, perfect. Amazing. So where we are, so we've gone from careers for climate. We've started to look at a wider narrative skill set around creativity and obstacles. And now we're going to look at an industry in transition. So the front line of solutions-oriented industries, the final chapter in our summit. Thank you for your attention so far. I want to pay tribute to the legendary Amy Westervelt. Her platform, Drilled Media, is an incredible resource. Listen to like the first 4 episodes and you're going to be an expert on this fossil fuel divestment topic. So we're going to do the ABCs again. Next slide. So in terms of the craft, marketing PR was invented by Ivy Lee, who was tasked with selling the idea that the oil industry is a fundamental part of our lives. So Ivy Lee is considered the godfather of PR. And essentially, this industry needed a positive image. His skill set was also used for genocidal movements way back when, so like not a great guy. And he understood how to manipulate the media. In fact, he discovered that his press releases were being published as full articles. And he was charged with planting distrust and denial and delay. And these exact tactics are still being used today to grow and legitimize polluting industries that are killing our planet. And as we've already mentioned, but it is worth reinstating, that the UN Secretary General has actually made an explicit call that these industries need to stop representing the worst polluters, which are fossil fuel. And we can skip past this slide. Essentially, it's just validating that they've greenwashed. But I want to go back to the last slide, which is to leave you with this message that the advertising, PR, and marketing industries have a huge role to play in transforming the path that we're on. And to begin with, like the first step is actually tackling its greenwashing problem. Standard definition of greenwashing: to make people believe that your company is doing more to protect the environment than it really is. We don't need to make it more complex. So we're going to do a little spotlight on this initiative that we've created called the Ethical Agency Alliance. And these are agencies that are walking the talk. They're committing not to represent oil and gas. They're engaging their staff in anti-greenwash trainings, and they're collaborating to pioneer solutions. So our big goal, as we've mentioned, is we want to normalize this as the baseline and signal to other industries. We want to mainstream this education, and we want to establish a leadership position, which brings us to our next speaker, who's going to talk about a case study of an agency in transition. So Lamia, I'd invite you to stand up and talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing.
Thanks, Lucy. How are we all? Good? Good? Energy levels good? Great. So my name's Lamia. I am a client partner and I'm the head of social impact at Lucky Generals. What does that job mean? So my job really is to challenge our clients to move the conversation from purpose and intent, we've been in that realm for quite a while, to actual tangible impact. And yeah, full disclosure, I'm actually quite new to advertising. I joined Lucky Generals a year ago. My background, I just would describe my career as a squiggle. I started off in human rights and international law, actually working with women in Islamic legal systems and supporting them through Sharia law and how to navigate it. I then worked at the British Council across their education society portfolio, so looking at international relations, so working on the ground with, in countries like Israel and Palestine on kind of inter-society, civil community projects and activations. I then did a little stint in behavior change, working for an agency, working with brands on using education as a driver for change, and then then worked in kind of global tech. So kind of a right low smorgasbord of different careers, different industries, and I guess that's quite valuable in advertising because there's not actually a lot of people with lived experience that actually create ads. So that's why I was brought in to kind of think about how we challenge our clients on that journey. So at Lucky Generals, we go to the next slide. It's enough of my face. So we describe ourselves as a creative company for people on a mission. So what's our mission? Not just to create powerful creative that cuts through that dial and culture, but also create compelling work that matters and drives real systemic change. So move on to the next slide. Last year, we had the most delicious opportunity to corrupt a national treasure. Allow me to introduce you to our latex-clad friend, Oblivia Coalmine. I'll move to the side. If someone hits play.
Hello, my name is Oblivia Coalmine, and on behalf of the fossil fuel industries, I would like to say a huge thank you for all your support this bumper year. People like you have pumped billions of your hard-earned pounds into our gas and oil businesses. The cash from your pensions has helped us dig, drill, and destroy more of the planet than ever before. We've even managed to build a few little wind turbines to keep Greta and her chums happy. Cute. You see, every little drop from your precious nest egg adds up. So while the global temperature may go up a teensy-weensy degree or two, our profits are literally soaring. And that's all thanks to you. So to guarantee us all a warmer, snugglier future, please keep sending your pensions our way. You know the drill. Oh, fracking hell. Okay, Dustin.
Yes. Thanks. So, nothing grabs attention like turning an Oscar-winning darling into a potty-mouthed fossil fuel CEO. Why did we create her? Because we knew we had to flip the script when it comes to green fatigue and shock people out of their apathy. We even got Greta to tweet about it and join the conversation. We all know that climate change is impacting our planet, and many of us are taking the steps to reduce our carbon footprint, whether it's eating less meat, recycling, turning off appliances at home. However, research from Root 2 reveals that one action combined has 21 times more impact, and that is moving your pension and understanding where your money goes. So greening your pension is one of the most powerful ways to fight the climate crisis. And that's why we partnered with Make My Money Matter, a brilliant charity to shed a light into this movement. And yeah, just looking into kind of how your pensions are being invested in a sustainable future. And our role within Lucky's is to
We did this pro bono, by the way. Everyone that did that campaign, no one made a buck out of it. We did it because we believed in the output and because we have a role in our industries to kind of shape that conversation. Because let's face it, the language is intimidating and it's evolving. Net zero, carbon offsets, circular economies. It's overwhelming, and the constant climate messaging with no clear action can make people switch off. That's why we kept it simple with one clear solution: green your money. Our goal was to cut through the noise and educate, and let's be honest, it's a pretty dry and complex topic, pensions, 401s, not the sexiest of things to bring to a creative team, but think about it from a creative opportunity and think about how you transmit that education through stealth, and as we discussed earlier, comedy. By offering a tangible solution people can actually take action on. And since our launch of that campaign a year ago, awareness on the subject has increased by 50%, and the percentage of people planning to switch to a more sustainable pension over the next 12 months has increased from 12% to 54%. This is where, when you work in social impact, you kind of want to have tangible impact data. So that's kind of the conversations we're trying to drive within Lucky Generals. Now, I believe the advertising industry stands at a pivotal moment. We have a chance to redefine our role from perpetuating the problem to becoming part of the solution. This isn't just a moral obligation anymore, it's a creative opportunity. We have the power to change not just the perceptions, but the entire narrative. This isn't about responding to the world as it is, it's about committing to the world we want to create. And if we, as creatives, as communicators, don't take the lead in this conversation, then who will? So at Lucky Generals, we're still learning and we're on that journey, seeking out brilliant partners like Lucy and the Creatives for Climate movement to help us, raise our game. Our real aha moment actually came when we joined the Clean Creatives movement. And if you're not familiar, they're all about kind of signing a pledge to divest from fossil fuel polluters. This decision was actually sparked by an account director, Omid. I'm going to just show you him here. He's a change maker in our organization. He was inspired by the Clean Creatives movement and brought it to Lucky Generals, to the senior leadership team. And for us, it was a no-brainer. But we listened, we facilitated a conversation, and we took action. But what I love about this story is that change doesn't necessarily need to come from the top down. It can come from the bottom up. And that's Omid there, facilitating the Clean Creatives London Happy Hour event that we did earlier on this year. And through that event, it connected us with a network of really brilliant, like-minded allies in the creative sector who are determined to drive that change. Staying true to our values while keeping the lights on is tough. It's difficult to balance that purpose versus profit. But the challenges push us to be more inventive and stay focused on using creativity for good. It solidified our commitment to use our influence and the work that we do, and the creative work that we put out there in the world to do better. So that's why we joined the Ethical Agency Alliance. That's a breakfast that I was invited to before I joined. Snacks is always really good, kind of incentive. But yeah, through that, we really have, we found a community, and we discovered that there's real strength in collective action. Around that table, there's like-minded agencies who you'd probably pitch against for work, but we're all united in thinking about, well, if we're going to actually drive impact, within our industry and do, something actionable, it's much better if we come together and tackle it together rather than doing it independently. So it's a supercharged movement, and it's all about instilling that mindset and behavior change within the agency by sharing knowledge, resources, and a common goal to make our creative efforts stronger and more cohesive. So, as Lucy mentioned earlier, we're rolling out the anti-greenwashing course because talk is cheap, action actually changes the game. It's a brilliant, brilliant masterclass, packed with legal insights, expert advice, and real, tangible, sticky examples that empowers everyone within the agency to understand how to talk about greenwashing and have that fluency. We're not just keeping that knowledge to ourselves. Our goal is actually to take that learning to our clients so they feel equipped, confident, and ready to challenge norms and be better. So if you haven't seen it. Okay, there's a guide online. I'm doing a few plugs for you, but I think it's a brilliant resource that we have found incredibly helpful. And then next month, we're really excited to launch the Lucky Green Book. It's an open source directory designed to help the creative sector become a lean, green mean machine. The idea was sparked at the London Clean Creatives event because all great ideas happen in the pub. But, you know, the conversation came out that, you know, when it comes to the business that we're in, you know, that scope 3 of emissions, the work that we put out there in the world, we really need to think about, you know, how can we make it more sustainable in terms of engaging with sustainable suppliers. So our role here is trying to do an open source directory to help make those connections more, more available and more, you know, share that within a global network as well. Because I guess it's not something that is top of mind. It's not through a procurement process, but hopefully this will, you know, give us that contact list for us to think about that as more of a consideration. So it'll be filled with contacts to connect agencies with sustainable suppliers, partners and innovators. If there's any of you that is in this room that fits that bill, please come and talk to me because we'd love to kind of profile you and share that knowledge. But by opening our network, we aim to empower the entire industry to make smarter, greener choices and drive real collective progress. Go to the next slide. That's it branded, but it's going to be launching next month. But that's a sneak peek. Our design team have been working on in London. But I guess what's next? We keep pushing ourselves. We keep pushing our clients and the entire industry to be braver and to be bolder. Creativity for good isn't just about being seen. It's about making real impact. So before I finish, I just want to say, we're all creatives in the room. Put your hands up if you work in the creative industry. So ask yourself this: is your work driving for a more equitable and inclusive world? Can you prove it? Can you measure it? Do you have your receipts? Because then that you're on the right path and you should make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lamia. Now, I have to say that she's been training me all week to pronounce her name correctly. So I'm saying it right, Lamia. Perfect. Yeah, I nailed it, finally. So now we're heading into my favorite part, which is a game. So we can go to the next slide, but it's going to be a party, so we can go to the next one. So before we get into this one, I know that there are new faces in the room, so I'm going to hand this over so you can pass it to the room. You just need to keep one sticker and keep it till the end. Now, we're going to play this video, and after playing this video, we're going to share with you some swatches so that we can play the fun game.
Welcome to the Greenwash Watch. We're here at Cannes Lions Creativity Awards on the lookout for greenwashing. What is greenwashing and how can we keep the advertisement industry accountable? Let's hit the beach at Cannes and find out.
I have one that I really like to talk about.
Straight away, the example I will give you is of Total rebranding to Total Energies.
Volkswagen with the diesel scandal.
Exxon's ads.
Exxon's algae fuels.
Exxon did have an algae fuels program, but the only problem is that they never actually sold any of it. It gives the consumer the impression that they can use their car and have fuel made out of algae, and the fuel just didn't exist. It's never been used. You can't buy it.
The ones which worry me, and it's almost difficult to pull out an example, are the soft greenwash, the misuse of images, the putting wind turbines in the back of your advert when nothing in your product is in any way contributive or restorative of nature.
What's the German word for you fucked up?
What is the German word for you fucked up?
Scheiße.
The most important thing to do is actually to step away from working with them until they get their act together. The most leverage you have as a creative is to not work with somebody.
Tobacco ads aren't a thing anymore. The ad industry got rid of that, and a bunch of creatives said no.
One thing which I think it's really important to remember about greenwash, though, is most of it isn't malicious. It's marketeers getting over-enthusiastic about a claim and thinking that that one green attribute is bigger and more important than it is. And that's why it's so hard to change.
How do we address the issue of environmental racism? Once we get all those different struggles together, this is how we will combat climate change in general. Yes, we can.
Raise your capacity to acknowledge your ignorance and go and find someone who knows what they're talking about. Go and find some climate scientists and ask whether what you're saying is valid.
Thank you so much. This was very helpful.
I'm here to help the Greenwashing Watch.
As creatives, we are the myth builders and storytellers of our society. We have the power, platform, and influence to drive meaningful climate action. Go to creatorsforclimate.co, sign up to the Greenwash Watch course, and radically reskill for climate action.
Do you need to twerk in a tomato outfit, or in this case, run on a beach in a bikini to get the attention? But anyway, anti-greenwash education is a big part of our movement, because to empower skills, for creatives with the right skills, we need to guide them to know how to make the right difference. So anyway, we've got 2 free resources that you can access. Then one of them is on the next slide. We've got like an incredibly comprehensive 30-page anti-greenwash guide. It's free. You have no excuses not to know the regulation. And we also have this fun little greenwash swatch, which you all have and is kind of expensive to print, so please keep them. But you get one each. And we're just gonna play a little game, because this is actually quite a lot of content. Thank you for sticking with us, but we have just a little bit to go. So let's loosen things up. You're gonna be really equipped in your job if you can get familiar with the next 6 shades of greenwashing. So we'll walk through them together. Green crowding, relying on safety in numbers and the fact that the crowd will move at the speed of the slowest. Think of like multi-stakeholder initiatives, for example. Green lighting, spotlighting something green to draw attention away from unsustainable practices, operations, or products. Green labeling, marketing something as sustainable, but upon closer examination, the claim is misleading. Green shifting, implying that the consumer is at fault and shifting the blame onto them, classic. Green hushing, underreporting or hiding sustainability credentials to evade scrutiny from investors. And green rinsing, so we're seeing this one pop up more and more, regularly changing environmental, social, and governance targets before they are met. So, fun game. Is it greenwashing? And if so, what shades? So we'll take a few answers. So let's look at this campaign. What do people think? Connecting the world, protecting its future, inspired by nature, engineered to preserve it. Next slide. Oh, shit. Okay, now I know how the game works. Okay. Let's go to that slide. This one's green labeling. Don't worry, I've got some more. So this was actually called out by the Advertising Standards Authority for being misleading because there are currently no environmental initiatives or commercially viable technologies in the aviation industry which would substantiate the green claim. So actually, rules around greenwashing are slightly different in the EU. We're a little bit more advanced, unfortunately, than here in the US. But generally speaking, if you're going to make a claim, you need to be able to back it up. Quite simple. Okay, next one. This is a campaign for Shell. Bristol is ready for cleaner energy is the tagline. How do we feel about this, Gareth?
Putting me on the spot. I was too cocky and I didn't take one of the greenwash watches. But I'm gonna call this green. Is it green rinsing?
Does anyone else want to talk about their response to this ad in general? And why? For Dummies, responses are okay.
Because I think they are asking the public if they are ready, like if they have to be ready, and it hasn't happened because they weren't ready before. Maybe.
Anyone else want to share a response to this campaign? Maybe you don't think it's greenwashing, also okay. Yep, over here.
Yeah, it looks initially positive, but I think it might be green crowding because it says that there's going to be like a lack of charging or something.
The kind of scary thing about this game is that many people can be right. So next slide. Green lighting, I felt like, by the way, I'm making the rules here, so you might be right and I might be wrong. I'm trying to create a democratic environment. But green lighting, spotlighting something green to draw attention away from unsustainable practices, operations, or products. Typically in the oil and gas industry, they're kind of ignoring the fact that their fundamental business operations are pretty polluting. And the ad was ruled misleading by the Advertising Standards Authority, so the ASA is really at the forefront of this regulation and litigation. But they said that they admitted significant information about the overall environmental impact of Shell's business activities, so the operations, which includes substantial ongoing and expanding fossil fuel production. Okay, next ad. Does anyone recognize this ad? Yeah? Want to talk about it?
Oh my God. Is that the recycling campaign they did about reclaiming cans? Yeah, I think they try to be like, we're inclusive of many culture and like we also like reclaim all of our cans, but it's like it lacks information about the end of life of the product. So we can really, you know, specify like data, okay, does everyone in every country that they posted this ad recycles? And what is their recycling process there? Do they even have a recycling plant? So yeah, it's very vague, let's say. But maybe I'm forgetting something.
I went to a masterclass 2 days ago here at New York Climate Week on anti-greenwash regulation, and actually the shocking thing that I found out was that there's an emphasis on if it's recyclable, not whether it is recycled in terms of these major claims. Anyone else want to give a response or have a perspective on the shade of greenwashing at play? Yes.
Thank you. So I feel like it's kind of green shifting in that it's putting the onus on us to then recycle the product that they're creating and the pollution they're creating, it's now our responsibility to recycle it.
And how does that make you feel?
You know, it's frustrating because at the end of the day, we're not the ones creating all the products. We're not the ones that are creating the pollution to begin with, but then it's our responsibility to clean up the mess that this corporation is creating.
It's bullshit, right? Yeah. All right, next slide. Green shifting, well done. Yay, a prize. Ursula, maybe some stickers? Implying that the consumer is at fault and shifting the blame onto them. All right, so actually, this won an award, shockingly, this year. So the jury president at Cannes Lions describes, embarrassingly, and I can say things like this, the work is iconic, an inspiration. And Adweek, brilliantly, Catherine Lundstrom, pioneering journalist, said it was generally laughable, and many others just called it out for what it was. I mean, it just disillusionment, you know, from a top advertising awards show to really just basically play into the hands of corporate players. Unfortunately, this game can be played anywhere and everywhere. So this greenwash swatch is actually available, licensed under Creative Commons on the website, free if you're a professor or you want to just, you know, use this at work. You're welcome to educate people with it yourself. So keep this in your little pocket. Bring it out at any moment. Yeah, it's yours, and unfortunately, we all need to get more climate literate. If you're looking to dive into the weeds, I'm really proud that we put together like a really comprehensive guide. It's actually hard to find one place where there's all the latest regulation. But my overarching message and my kind of mission is to empower people just to feel more confident with this stuff. Like, if you're doing the right thing, you don't necessarily need to get into the weeds of learning how not to get caught, is kind of the message. But if you need to, we've got you. So, I just want to play a tiny little clip from our friends at Client Earth that worked with us on this report, and then we will move into the final part.
The advertising industry is incredibly important because it holds the keys to getting information in society correct when it comes to transition, when it comes to climate change. One of the things that we've worked on is cases that look at advertising strategies that particularly high polluting industries put out and how they conflict with the laws that we have. We've been excited to work on this report because it's important that the ad industry gets ahead of those rules and starts to really unlock the possibilities when you know the facts and you can communicate really compellingly about the future that we need. So I'm speaking to you tonight because I've been working on the Creatives Climate for Climate report with them. And the thing I've been really trying to get across in that work is that when you look under the bonnet of law and regulation at the moment, you see a massive shift. There is a big crackdown in law on greenwashing, and new rules are coming out everywhere, starting in the EU, that are going to make that a lot more of a real thing for everybody. What we need, however, is for people to see those laws coming and to go beyond them. And that's why I think it's so important to team up for Creatives for Climate to do the thinking that begins here in this report. My big lesson from working on this report and on litigation and regulation in this space is to really make sure that you're confident you can get on top of the key facts that you need to consider for the claim that you're making. If I've got one message for people in the room, and it's speaking as somebody who's been a lawyer for well over 10 years now and has worked on these issues for some time, is that we really need you. We need people who are able to do the thing that lawyers and courtrooms can only go so far in doing, which is to communicate much better on these issues and to give people the messages of hope that we need to get through this moment.
So there you have it, from someone that looks like he has a lot more authority than me, so what I said was right, obviously. We've covered a lot. We have also spoke consistently about funding. And I want to invite my friend Mauricio on stage to give you a perspective on the role that citizens can play in supporting this movement. So Mauricio, take it away.
Thank you.